Welcome to the podcast, fellow griever. I'm Melissa, your host, and I'm with you on this journey because my own incredible 21-year-old son, Alex, died by suicide on August 7th in 2016. My world was shattered, but slowly, bit by bit, I began the difficult journey of rebuilding a new life, just like you may be doing right now. So know that I see you, because I am you. Thank you so much for being here. It truly means more than I can say. And if you are new to the podcast, please consider listening to the introduction, Meet Me, episode number 1, which is now linked in the show notes starting in late season 6. Listen to know what to expect from the podcast, to learn more about me, and so that you will know all that I offer in my community for support, connection, and healing. If you are not a new listener and haven't listened to this Meet Me episode recently, it's updated and you may learn something new. Every week, we will continue to explore the questions that haunt us, seek the courage to uncover the healing tools within us, and offer the comfort of a community we all need so very much. Come along with me, because this is so very lonely, but we do not have to be alone. Together, let's choose to find meaning and even happiness amid the leftover pieces before us. Welcome to today's episode. Hello and welcome, fellow griever. Today you have reached episode 55 in season 6. Yes, I'm going to move on to a different season soon, 5. And as you know, I've been leaning into the prevention arena in the form of advocacy, where postvention and open conversations about suicide loss and the legacy that we leave for our loved ones, how that becomes prevention by its very nature. And so with this final conversation for this month, I'm bringing on a lovely woman named Patty Bourne, who is a board-certified psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner. She is, among other things, also a licensed massage therapist and nurse coach in training who integrates mind and body care together. Patty's also a 2-time suicide loss survivor herself. Her ex-husband, Charlie, died in 2012. And then despite every best effort, she also lost her middle son, Zachary, at age 19 last year in September of 2024. Patty speaks openly about grief, stigma, and what truly supports healing. Her mission is to normalize mental health conversations in healthcare and everyday life while honoring both Charlie and Zack through the work that she does. Some of the things that you're going to hear us discuss are the idea of reaching in versus waiting to reach out. We're going to discuss disconnection as a main mental health issue in today's world. We're going to talk about the mental health is health piece and how inner circles can benefit from having code words or code phrases when they really need to talk. We talk a lot about parenting and loss and healthcare and cultural shifts, but I hope you'll stay with us to the end when we do talk about trauma and the great need for the recognition in our society and our culture for acute and cumulative trauma both, but then the long-term support that we actually need to help us move into a healthy space after experiencing trauma. And at the core, this episode insists that connection is protective and that we can't wait for people to reach out. We have to be willing to reach in. I think you'll enjoy this episode. I think you'll take a lot from it. And I think you know that it's conversations like this that's how we honor the people we've lost and keep showing up for the ones that are still here. Please be sure to see the show notes if you would like to be connected with Patty in any of the capacities that she's out there. And then let's go ahead and get started and welcome Patty to the conversation today. Hi, Patty. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's my honor. I want you to start the way I ask everyone to start, Patty, which is share your lost story, whatever that means to you, however you would like to tell that.
Sure. I am no stranger to suicide, unfortunately, because I did lose my ex-husband, Charlie, to suicide in September of 2012. And I instantly became a single parent, which was, pretty scary. And spent a good portion of that time trying to keep this from ever happening again in our family. However, it did. And it happened with our middle child, Zachary, in September of 2024. He was 19 and we lost him to suicide. Two-time suicide survivor. I mean, I feel like I'm surviving it every single day, but yeah, I wish I didn't have double the experience to speak from than everybody else.
Yeah, I wish you didn't either. And your story is really profound to me. I'd like you to speak a little bit, if you would, to the fact that, a lot of times as survivors, live through this idea that other people, whether they tell us or not, the whispers under their breath are there had to have been something that people didn't know, whether it's about us, our family, our loved one that died. They make assumptions that there was something going on that they didn't understand that would have caused it, because most people make the assumption that suicide happens when there's something blatantly, obviously wrong, a huge addiction, a mental health disorder that they assume must be large, because mental health disorders, and we can speak to that later, that's part of the problem. The stigma of mental health disorders is a problem in itself. But this idea that only people or families of a certain type have this happen to them, if you know what I'm saying. And even though Charlie was your ex, I know that some of his mental health struggles were maybe what caused the divorce. You knew he struggled. But then you went into, I want you to talk about the mode that you went into of this isn't going to happen again, and everything you did to put those guardrails in place for your children, right?
At that time, Charlie was my first husband, but I ended up getting remarried and having a fourth child. I had 3 children with my first husband, Charlie.
Speak to that a little bit of what you did to try to put all those guardrails in place.
Well, you're correct in saying that Charlie did have struggles while we were married. And it actually started before we were married, but I was 21 years old when I met him. I hadn't experienced a lot with regard to mental illness. I didn't know what it looked like, what it was called. When we met, he told me he had already attempted to take his own life when he was 19 and he was in the military. I figured, well, that was many years ago. I'm sure he's over that now because here he is. He's in front of me, seems to be functioning. But I was very naive and I didn't know what exactly I was looking at. And not until many years of being together and having children did I realize that he did have mental health struggles and he struggled with addiction. It seemed like the more children we had, the more he was involved in his addictions and everything else, all his other struggles that he had just living day to day. So once we had 2 boys, I figured, okay, I don't need my boys to grow up thinking that this is what a dad is supposed to be like. I just kept seeing things, hearing things that alerted me to the fact that suicide is something that he will always keep as an option in the back of his mind. And that terrified me. I didn't want my children to ever find his body. So even though I've said this on several other podcast interviews before, I did happen to still love my husband. It was one of the most difficult things that I've had to do, but I really did feel like I need to love my children more. I need to try to get them out of this household. The thought of them finding him terrified me, but he wasn't doing what he needed to do to get better. And I couldn't do it for him. Who do I invest my time and energy into? My children or this grown man that needs to be able to take control of his life and his mental health. Clearly, it was my children. So I divorced my husband, even though I still loved him, had to somehow try to protect my children from that. It was a very difficult choice. But he did die not too long after that. I feel like once he was a single guy, he went downhill very quickly. It wasn't too long after that he was gone. I spent years trying to keep that from ever happening again. I knew that because we had 2 sons, they were little when their father passed away, but eventually they would be able to understand what happened. And I wanted to prevent that. We talked about it openly, like people talk about sports and the weather. We talked about suicide and mental health openly. We talked about their father openly, good times, bad times, and everything in between. And I even pursued a career in mental health to be able to have more resources for my children, to be able to have more knowledge to pull from so that I could direct my children in the direction they needed to go and advocate for them if I ever had to. So this was not something that I took lightly by any means. It became my life's work, honestly. We still lost my son. We still lost Zack. And when I say we, I mean Zack and I. We fought hard. Zack struggled with so many things, but we were a team, and he knew there was nothing his mom would not do for him. We did so many things to try and keep him from having the same ending as his dad. Yet it still happened.
Did Zack talk openly about being suicidal?
Not all the time. The one time that he did, and I felt that he was not safe, we went and put him inpatient at hospital, where he stayed for about 9 days. And he never spoke again of being suicidal until, so that would have been January of 2020. So this would have been April of 2022. Unfortunately, we lost our home in a devastating fire, and Zachary sustained some pretty devastating burns as a result of this fire. 2nd and 3rd degree burns on 1/3 of his body. And he was in the burn ICU in what I can only imagine to be excruciating pain. And after he came home from the hospital, he told me, I did try to take a bunch of my pain medicine at once, hoping that I just wouldn't wake up again. But I just got sleepy and nothing happened. Correct. Yeah. So he was like stockpiling his pain medications, is what he told me months later, though. And other than that, I would ask him if he was suicidal. He would tell me no. The problem is my son, I don't think, was very forthcoming. My son was not completely honest about what his struggles were. I think he felt a lot of shame, honestly. But Mom had no question asking, what's going on? What are you feeling? Like, what do we do to help? What do we do to fix this? Or what do you need me to do for you? But I just don't think my son was completely forthcoming. And that's a difficult piece. We can't make people open up to us. We can't make people be truthful, right? We have to take them at their word. So if my son tells me he's fine, I had no choice but to assume he was fine. There was certainly nothing that alerted me that he wasn't doing fine. Yes, we talked about it and he had shared before.
Well, first of all, thank you for sharing all of that. It doesn't get it easier to talk about. I mean, I guess we become more adept at talking about it, but that doesn't mean it's easier to talk about it. So first, thanks for sharing all of that. And to realize what most of us would go through if we had 3/4 of our body burned, and how, like you said, the pain.
One third, not 3/4.
Okay, 1/3. Well, I was like, 1/3's enough, right? That's enough, right? Yeah, so to have a massive amount of our body affected by burns, like you said, even being able to try to imagine the amount of pain he was in physically, then that of course causes mental anguish as well. And to have him dealing with that in just over 2 years later, you lost him. So Because if that was April of 2022, is that what you said? Then you lost him in September of 2024.
Yeah.
What did his mental struggles, did it look different during that 2 years? And do you feel like a lot of it, I mean, not that it matters. I'm just curious if you feel like a lot of it was the consequence in some ways to the burns and to, even the fire had to have been traumatic to live through, Patty.
No question. No question. It was traumatic for me. I was home when this happened. I saw my son on fire in front of me, screaming for me to help him. It was traumatizing for me, and I didn't get burned like he did, right? Mm-hmm. I lost my entire house. I lost everything in it. That was traumatizing too, but nothing compares to your child being injured in such, a horrific way. I'd never heard these blood-curdling screams like I heard that day. So me being an adult having to deal with that, and him being a 17-year-old boy having to deal with that, clearly he had some trauma to deal with. And not to minimize it at all, but my son wanted to be a welder before this happened. This was his dream, was to be a welder. After the fire, I said to him, Zachary, I completely understand if you never want to be a welder in your life. I get it. I bet you want to have nothing to do with fire or combustion or anything like that. And he said, no, actually, Mom, I do still want to do it. I said, are you sure? He goes, oh, yeah, definitely. And I said, okay, he was still recovering. Right. When my son died, he was in welding school already in the middle of his second semester. He loved it. In my mind, he had already conquered it enough to be able to have welding as a profession. Clearly, we've been able to jump over some pretty huge hurdles. Me, I probably would have wanted to have absolutely nothing to do with welding, right? We asked him repeatedly, are you sure? Are you sure? Oh, yeah, I'm positive. Please stop asking me. I'm fine. Okay. Now you're 18 years old, like you're not a baby. I can't tell you what to do, but I'll buy you the books. We'll pay the tuition, no problem. And he loved it. So again, in my mind, if my child has overcome something so horrific, traumatizing, life-changing, clearly he's on an upswing. Clearly, better days are ahead. This young man not only made a complete recovery from his injuries, they told us he'll be in the burn ICU for like 2 months. Honey, he was out in 2.5 weeks. He made such a tremendous recovery. He finished high school, went to his prom, joined the marching band again, played the bass drum, which is this huge, heavy drum, had to walk all over the place with this drum. The burns were on his feet. His feet were destroyed in the fire. He had to have them pretty much rebuilt. So for this young man to join the marching band the same year, right? Go to prom, graduate high school, get his driver's license, buy himself a truck, get a job, and get enrolled in welding school, I think anybody would be like, okay, this kid's doing way better. Wow. He is a miracle. This is a success story, right? I had been worried about my son so many times prior to this, but I figured if this young man can come away from that and do all of this.
He literally came through the fire.
Ma'am, yeah. And I, even before my son passed away, said, buddy, I'm really proud of you. You have accomplished and checked the boxes for all of the things you wanted to do. He desperately wanted to be independent. I just want to be independent, Mom. I want to show you I can do these things. I said, and you've done it. You've checked all the boxes, dude. I'm so proud of you. This is literally a week or two before he passed. He said, "Thank you, Mom. Really feels good to be recognized. Thank you." I didn't have a concern in the world for this young man when he passed away. I was terrified years prior. My son was in self-destruct mode. Okay. He was vaping in school, then he moved on to weed, and then he's doing other reckless things that I probably don't even know about, never will know about, but dangerous, reckless things with shooting BB guns in the woods and lying and stealing from me, right? From other people in the home. And all of those things seem to be behind us.
I hear this way, way too much, the out of left field thing. The lack of surprise never makes the fact that it happens any softer, right? I mean, whether people are surprised or not, you probably weren't surprised at the outcome. It didn't make it less devastating or less sad, because the reality of it happening is far different than the idea that it could happen. It's far different in our minds.
Here's what I liken it to. You can have a family member on hospice, right? And know that we're going to lose them. And we can prepare and we can say goodbye. However, not until the moment that they're gone does it really hit us. And we can grieve beforehand too. It's so impactful and life-changing. They cross over. It's the same thing, not to mention for suicide. There's such a violent component to it usually, which just complicate matters and the mess that's left behind. And I say that figuratively, not literally, the things that we have to clean up, because nobody had any warning. Nobody had any idea that this was coming. It's just devastating.
And you're right, it's the complication, right? Because you can't necessarily say that it's worse than any other tragic death, but boy, it's more complicated in so many ways, because, I often talk about how with other, sudden traumatic losses, a car accident, a murder, a homicide, an overdose, accidental overdose, we don't necessarily put in the same category as an intentional overdose. But, so these other sudden out of order deaths still don't have that. There's a way to kind of, I don't want to say lay your blame somewhere, but you can kind of lay your blame somewhere. You can kind of say, it was a car accident. It was a malintended human being who had a gun and fired into a crowd, or robbed the store, did something. And we have somewhere to lay that. When our loved one ends their own life, the blame situation becomes super complicated because ultimately they did it. But the more we understand, and as a mental health professional, you know this too when I say this, boy, the word choice has become complicated for me, because to say that Alex made the choice to end his life, from a very literal standpoint, kind of. I mean, he was the one that carried through the method that ended his life, but it wasn't the choice the way you and I think choices are when our mind is in its right place, when our mind is operating as it should. It's not the same choice as picking up my drink of water and taking a sip of water. It's not the same choice as turning right at the stoplight. We are hardwired as human beings to rail against our life ending, right? As your son did in a fire, as you watched happen, we rail against pain and all circumstances to stay alive. Like, that's our instinct. So when something happens in the human brain that allows us to make that choice, again, that's a wonky word. I don't feel like Alex, I feel like he would still be here if he could be. And I don't know how you feel about Zack, but I feel like Alex didn't want to die. Alex just didn't want to feel the way he was feeling. And wanting to die is different than wanting the pain to stop. And so therefore, in my opinion, the quote unquote decision that isn't made in a right frame of mind isn't the same choice as a lot of people. That's not what he wanted. He wanted to have a life free of all of the things he was feeling and, to live in a But it makes me think that Zack had to be, and you bring such a good thing to the forefront that I think many of us know exists, which is we can do all the right things. And more often than not, people that die by suicide have a loving family around them, which is the opposite thought that a lot of people have. This must have been somebody that had, had put themselves on the outside of their families or wasn't well loved or something. And that's usually not the case at all. This person, if people don't want us to know, there's nothing we can do. Like you said, there's only so much you can do. And so coming from somebody who tried to do everything right, you had the talks, you went to walks, you did all the things, you became a psychiatric nurse, you work with at-risk people, you were at the forefront, you had worked through battles with Zack, and yet it still happened. It still happened, even under the most unlikely circumstances, if you will, because for whatever reason, he was still holding something inside of him that apparently was larger than he was, wouldn't you say?
It's interesting because being a psychiatric nurse practitioner, which is a little different than a psychiatric nurse.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
No, people that are listening that are in the field will know.
Okay.
One word difference makes a difference. Being a psychiatric nurse practitioner, I can prescribe medications. I can diagnose people. But there is something that ethically says you're not supposed to do it to your own child for many reasons. And this is a whole separate discussion in and of itself. Clearly, I would be biased. Zachary and I had a history together. All of those things, whether we would want to admit it or not, influence our every decision, our every thought. But not only that, Zachary was never going to be 100% honest with his mom because it's his mom. And I understood that. Even though he would go and see somebody professionally that does exactly what I do, it wasn't his mom. So my big thing was always, guys, I don't care who you talk to. It doesn't matter to me. You don't have to talk to me. Believe me, my feelings will not be hurt. Just talk to someone, okay? I don't need to know everything. As a matter of fact, I already know because I've been a kid. Don't worry about it.
Even when you love her, even when you're close to her, that she's still your mom and you don't want to. Yeah.
I understood why all the degrees and all the certifications and all the trainings that I had were not going to help me with my son and his struggles. I understood that. I was okay with it. And as a matter of fact, ethically, that's how he would want it. My son was being seen by a professional. My son was taking medications like he was supposed to. My son was going to his appointments. Matter of fact, right before he passed away was the first time he was able to drive himself in his vehicle to his own psychiatric appointment, make his follow-up appointment, and pick up his medications all by himself. He's now, 19 years old. He's got all the independence that he wanted. He was so proud of himself, okay? He was going to therapy, intensive therapy, 3 hours a week, 3 times a week. My son was doing all the right things. It's not like all of a sudden he turned 18 and I was hands off and, okay, kid, go figure it out. No, we still were very much partnership. He's at his psychiatric appointment texting me, Mom, here's my next appointment. This is the time I made it. I'm going to send you a calendar invite. Please accept it. We had great communication. He knew I was his biggest advocate and cheerleader. As a matter of fact, this part gets me emotional. When my son passed away, his friends told me he always told us how much he loved his mom, how he wouldn't be here if it wasn't for his mom. He loved you more than anything. My son knew he was loved. My son knew without a shadow of doubt. I know he knew it. One of the biggest things that I struggled with was, did my son know how much? Yes, he did. My son was loved tremendously by his mom, his bonus dad, who he looked up to and admired, and all of his siblings. Everybody loved Zack. Unfortunately, my son was on the spectrum. He did struggle so very much to connect with his peers. He desperately wanted friends, and it was what eluded him the most. See, your family can love you to the moon and back, but if you don't feel seen and heard amongst your peers, it doesn't amount to much sometimes. And that is what Zack truly wanted, was to be seen and heard by people his age, people that he related to, people he was doing his online gaming with and going to school with. Those are the people that he wanted to be seen and loved by, and he wasn't. And that is why I believe my son is no longer here. Did my son want to leave this? No, he didn't. He didn't know how to stay. And I'll say this, he made the best choice that he could out of what was available to him. In his mind, the alternative was worse. Can anybody truly understand that unless we've been in that position? No. But I can tell you this, I never understood my son's depression until he left. And then I got it. Yeah, I can tell you now, joy eludes me. Ever since my son left, I've forever changed. I get it now. It's so hard to struggle to find the joy in everyday living. That is what he struggled with. Now that he's gone, I feel that. Oh, I so feel that. Did I feel like I'd be better off not being here? You better believe I did. But as an adult, well, not till my son crossed over.
I thank you for your candidness and your honesty. And I have talked about that briefly before too, and that I never understood suicidality. I understood, I had postpartum depression after one of my children, ironically, Alex, took medication for 6 months, and then it was under control enough I went off of them. I had witnessed a lot of depression in my life and my family, but it had pretty much eluded me. I had been able to be pretty resilient and had always been one of those people that said, not in a crass way, was never like one of those rude people that said it was selfish or things like that. But I would always say, I just don't understand how people could be sad enough that they would want to die. Like, I would say that, like, how does somebody get to that place? And so I had always also not really understood, had the empathy for that kind of feeling until after Alex was gone. And it was about year 3, right after I had my TIA, actually. I had a TIA that was kind of my wake-up call 3 years in. And when I did the research and realized the risk that I was at for a major stroke at that point, that was when I realized I wanted to live. Because up until then, that first 3 years after he was gone, I too had gotten to that place of thinking, I don't know what the point is and if I want to do this anymore. Joy was eluding me as well. I understood that feeling that he had to have of what's the point, and is this ever going to get better? Could it possibly get better? And when my body told me, okay, enough's enough, I wasn't dealing with things adequately. I was stuffing it all inside, and my body knew. And at that moment, I realized I wanted to live. But boy, I was at the bottom. I was at the bottom of scratching my way up to, okay, now I'm afraid I'm going to die. And I didn't think I would. I'm not afraid of that anymore. But I also no longer want, I did for a brief period of time. And I never had a plan. I was never actively suicidal, but suicidality stuck its head in there and showed me what Alex was feeling, and realizing that, carrying it like I did and living the truth that I did, I had to go to the two closest people to me and be honest with them so that it didn't cross that line. And that's where I think this bridges us into the next part of our discussion, Patty, which is disconnection, lack of connection, whichever word we want to use, to people when we need it the most is one of the hardest things for somebody that's struggling to come back from, because without the connection, you can be connected to your family, but if you're not connected to your peers and you don't feel like you have those tendrils out there in the world that are what keeps us here, then what do we do? And I know you had a little bit of a story to even talk about this with I believe with one of the young men that spoke at your son's funeral. So talk a little bit about connection or lack of connection and how you feel like that not only played a role in Zack's death, but I think it's a larger discussion where we can kind of talk about afterwards, how do we turn this around? How do we fix it? Because I think it's one of the biggest things that's probably creating suicide more than anything is this lack of connection.
Yeah, lack of connection that's pretty big. And for my son, who struggled with it his whole life pretty much, it was very much at the forefront of his mind all the time. At my son's celebration of life, one young man stood up and spoke up about Zack, said a few words, and he said, Zachary reached out to me a few days before he passed away, and he asked me, could we hang out? And I told him I had to find the time. He said, and I never found the time. And he just was hysterical, sobbing, Zack made an attempt to connect, with someone, and maybe it wasn't intentional, right? But he was blown off. I don't know how many times that happened to him in that week and month, but I know my son was heavily intoxicated the day that he died. I didn't find out till afterwards that he had purchased mouthwash and become intoxicated with that. Remember, he was 19. He couldn't buy alcohol legally. But he did that morning. I found the transaction on his debit card. He'd been to Walmart that morning and purchased mouthwash. And when I saw him in the middle of the day, he was heavily intoxicated. I was furious. I don't condone underage drinking. We found out many months prior, 6 months prior maybe, he had gone into our liquor supply and replaced it with water and drank it. I still don't know when that took place, but he was forbidden from going anywhere near it. I immediately assumed that he had done that again. Not until after my son was gone did I realize it was mouthwash he had utilized. But we know that alcohol impairs our judgment, our impulsivity. I know for a fact if my son would have been sober, he would have still been here. But we had an argument right before he took his life. It happened in my home, in my bedroom, actually. After we argued, I guess he said, okay, this is it for me. But we had argued before. It happens. I had to do CPR on my child, even though I knew that he was gone. I had to perform CPR on him till first responders showed up and took over. But the connection piece, I don't know what happened that day. Why did my child decide to drink during the day I was at work? I don't know what happened, but he had a job interview the next day. We had been preparing for it. We updated his resume. He was excited about it, and something happened that upset him. Maybe he reached out to someone else who blew him off. I don't know. But when people reach out to you, I mean, we have smartphones now. We can do voice to text. It's so easy to just send a text back, hey, I've been thinking about you too, or when can you get together for a phone call? Anything, but don't blow people off. We don't know if they're desperately seeking to connect with someone because they're in a bad place. Not everyone's going to say that. But I really do believe in my heart of hearts, expecting people to reach out to us is not realistic.
Great.
I think that when you're in a
agree.
bad space, when I was grieving the loss of my son, everybody said, please let me know.
And we're never
what I
going
can do
to.
for
That's
you.
the worst thing you can say to a survivor is, let me know what I can do for you. I'm here. And
Let
I
me know
promise
what you
you.
need.
Yep. And instead, they have to be the ones to be willing to show up or to be there, because in the beginning, we're not going to. And, you made me think about, because I wanted to ask the question, and I feel like we've kind of answered it. But, I was going to ask, how do we even correct this connection thing, right? Because like I told you before we started recording, it's kind of been long in coming with everything from the technology boom of the last decade, especially. The last decade's been phenomenal with the amount of technology that we've introduced in a short period of time. And then we had COVID, which isolated an already isolated world even more. And now people are trying to crawl their way back from that, but I don't know that we're doing it very gracefully, especially younger people that were not given the skills to connect. We grew up connected by nature in our generation because we didn't have a little mini computer taking the place of our connections. You had an answering machine. So for the most part, if you wanted to see or talk to somebody, you were going out and seeing them and talking to them and meeting with them and sitting in your groups in the neighborhood, having discussions and going riding bicycles together. And you weren't relying on just laying in your bedroom separately texting on a phone. And we have such a different generation. And so I feel like we're at a place where, if anybody listening takes anything from this, I think I've heard more and more people do this. I've done it a little bit in my circle too, where we've kind of created a code, whether we've done it within our family, but also I have a small circle of friends that we've done it too, because sometimes, like this poor young man that spoke at Zachary's funeral, he obviously didn't realize how important it was that he made time, right? He didn't mean I don't have time for you, even though that's how it landed, right? And that's, that this young man's going to live with this the rest of his life, that, he'll probably make time for people to an excess now, I would imagine. But sometimes there has to be a code word. Some families use do you have 8 minutes? There's different things that we can say when we need to tell somebody, no, this is different than just, do you have time to chat? This is, I really need an ear right now. I really need somebody to show up for me. Can you answer the phone? Can we meet for coffee? And they come up with a way of not necessarily saying, this is super important, but a lighter way of saying this is super important, to not only advocate for themselves, but to help re-educate our circles that we have to be there for each other. We have to lean in. We've become so disconnected and self-absorbed as a society. And I'm not blaming you or me, or I like to think I'm not self-absorbed, but we've all done it to some extent in the way we live our lives now. Think of how connected communities used to be. And now if somebody knocks on our door, we're likely to hide in the bedroom and go, who's at the front door? And before, you'd holler, come in, or whatever when we were growing up, and people would walk in and you'd expect neighbors to stop by. Now we almost deem it rude if somebody stops by our house unannounced.
Yeah.
Think of that. Think of the difference in our society now, right? I almost feel like I can't call people unannounced, Patty. I don't know about you, but I feel like I have to text them. Can you talk? And why have we become that way? So how do we correct this? Do you have any thoughts?
I'll tell you this. I'm going to just speak up for the people that may have the same thinking that I do. I don't like to talk on the phone. I'll tell you why, though. I talk to patients about their suicidality and their mental illness all day long. The last thing I want to do is talk to you on the phone like I'm talked out. That's me, though. That's
But if
me and my
somebody
profession.
needed you,
Oh, yeah,
that's what I'm saying is if they
Yeah.
said, hey, this isn't just a chat, I need to talk, they gave you
But
the
you're
code
saying
or
you
whatever.
gotta text people first. Can you talk on the phone?
Yeah.
Text me. You do have to text me because no, I'm not gonna call you. Like, can it be on the weekend when I'm off because I'm talked out? That's
Right.
what I was speaking
That's
to.
fair, ma'am. I 100% understand that and agree. I also have a feeling that if somebody said to you, I know you don't want to talk and you're talked out, but I need you, you would also make time to talk. Exactly.
Okay. I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to talk about uncomfortable things.
Me too.
And that's the truth. I need parents to go to therapy. I need parents to go and get healed themselves. I need parents to do this preferably before they even have children. However, I understand I'm asking a lot. If you have children and you've never been to therapy, if you've never gone to get yourself healed, you need to do it. Here's why. We can't make these children all of a sudden talk to us about stuff or normalize these feelings, because all feelings are normal, even the bad one, right? We haven't gone to get healed. We don't even have the language, the ability to hold space for them. Why? Because we have no knowledge of it, right?
We don't have our own toolbox, so how can we teach them?
I'll compromise with you. Normalize everyday struggles. I'll give you an example. I would come home and say to my children, I had a rough day at work today. My coworker said something to me. I felt some type of way. I was mad at her all day. And I said, you know what? I think it's better if I just pull her aside and talk to her and we talk it out instead of me being resentful and angry, whatever, and then go from there. Have you guys ever experienced anything like this at school? Have you ever been upset with your classmates or whatever? How'd you handle it? I'm not coming to my kids to say, hey, I'm bringing you my adult problems, solve them for me. The point of the exercise is, I'm your parent. I still encounter uncomfortable feelings and unusual and uncertain situations where I'm not sure if I did the right thing or not. And it's okay if I didn't get it right, but here's how I fixed it. Our kids don't know that we struggle. Our kids just assume we've got everything figured out. How am I going to come to somebody with my problems, rather, who's got everything figured out? No, you don't have it all figured out, and neither do I. Let's talk about it. We can't even have those conversations with our kids, and we want them to talk to us about, are they suicidal? They're not going to. They're not going to. I'm going to say again, it's an unpopular opinion, but parents, you need to go get yourselves healed. You've got to. We've all got trauma. We've all got things that we've grown up with that have shaped us in a certain way that maybe we need to undo, okay? And if the parent says, I don't need to go to therapy, honey, that's the problem right there. That's the problem. Why not? Why don't you need it? How do you know you don't need to go? You asked yourself? Come on. Easiest person to lie to is yourself. We've got to normalize all of this. The struggles are real and they're there for all of us. There's nothing wrong with asking for help. There's so much normalcy to this that I'm going to go to therapy too. Matter of fact, we can go to a therapy session together as a family. You want to try that? Maybe we'll do that for the first couple times, and then we'll see how it goes. I'm not going to make you go by yourself. I'll go with you. Let's try it. Like, why can't we normalize these things? It has to start at home. It has to start with the parents.
It has to start with normalizing all mental health struggles. And you said something really important, normalizing all of our emotions, because moms are really bad at, sad is okay. And, meh is okay, but we're not angry and we're not, all these things that we can deem bad, when anger should have a seat at the table the same as any other emotion does, because they're all real. They all play a part in our physical and mental health. and not acknowledging them is just destructive.
Melissa,
Yeah.
especially for our young men.
Yeah.
You know, we lose young men to suicide at a much, much higher rate. Our men need to normalize this too.
Right, 100%. Right. And us normalizing it from the top down, from the parents down, is what's going to make a shift for younger generations. Absolutely. Because if we just teach younger people how to advocate for their mental health, period, how to be mental health forward, treat it the same as, I remember having kids come to me and say, Mom, I can't get my shoulder to feel better. Like, I had baseball players. So I think maybe it's time I go to the doctor. Well, they need to be able to do the same thing when they're like, you know what, for several weeks, I just have stuff going on that doesn't make sense. And I feel like maybe we need to talk about me seeing a therapist for a while or something. That should be as normal as my shoulders bothering me. And it's not. It's not yet.
Mental health is health.
100%.
You're not doing well mentally, honey. You're not doing well at all, period. It doesn't matter if
because it guides everything else. The number one thing that doctors throw out in today's world is anxiety. Oh, your symptoms may be from anxiety. Well, think about it. That's from this organ here, but they're coming in complaining about their stomach or their joints or fill in the blank. And the number one thing doctors tend to come back with over and over again these days are, I think maybe you're under a lot of stress. I think maybe we're dealing with an anxiety issue. So people that think that doesn't connect to the rest, it 100% does connect to the rest. But I'm going to, because we're here for hard conversations and we're here to tackle this stuff head on, I'm going to ask you something that I can throw back at myself as well. But you did all the things that you thought you could do. And you were there and you loved him and he loved you. And then there was this intoxicated, impulsive moment. And I think the impulsivity comes a lot of it with our young people. Alex was also someone prone to impulsivity, which means he fit a type that even I didn't know, but that's a whole nother discussion. I think they have the signs wrong. They're antiquated and old. The signs of what to watch for were created decades ago for middle-aged men who used to be our statistically highest likely group to end their life. And that's not the case anymore. So we need to look for the people that are more at risk. But if we can normalize and do all these things, we're going to be ahead of the game. But let's talk about the fact that you did all this stuff and you still lost your son. How do we reckon with that? And how do we find, because I've struggled with this too. I'm standing in front of a mirror asking you this question. I'm not being judgmental at all. And I think mom to mom, you understand and believe that. So how do we offer hope for, we did all the things and we love them and we still didn't see it, but then we stand here saying, but we should, somebody might be saying to us, how can either of you pretend to know what might change this when you couldn't change it for your own child, right? So let's address that for a second, because I think about that kind of thing a lot.
The fact of the matter is the person who had the answers is no longer here. And hindsight is always 20/20. Now that my son is gone, I have far more insight than I did then.
But don't you think part of what matters is us talking about these things so maybe we can increase the insight of others in the future, right?
Yeah. Right. Definitely. So that's what I'm saying. The insight I have now, I didn't have then, right? Not only into his death, but also in how he lived. I didn't understand living with depression and not wanting to participate in life felt like till my son was gone. I squeezed every minute out of every day before my son left. Now, not so much. I struggle to get out of my own way. I'm being completely transparent. I wish I could tell you that every day is wonderful. A lot of days suck and I want my son back. But at the end of the day, this insight is valuable for me to be able to share, hopefully educate others. And what I will say is, I now acknowledge that I did not give as much credence, importance to trauma. My son went through a lot of trauma, from being neurodivergent, from losing his father at a young age to such a violent and sudden death, okay? Oh, the trauma from losing his home, his family being displaced, his burns, his scars. He said to me one time, and I think once was enough because I felt it when he said it, no one's ever going to love me with all these scars. My son was going to be permanently disfigured. He knew that, right? But a young man of 17, 18, 19 years of age, you don't want to be unattractive to the ladies, right? But he felt unlovable maybe deep down, right? And then other little micro traumas that have happened to him throughout his life that maybe he didn't even think were a big deal, or he dissociated from his body where he doesn't even remember him himself. Who knows? But the importance of dealing with and healing from trauma is, I think, that is something that we are definitely not paying enough attention to, that plays a very big role in these people wanting to end their lives. When I think back, my son mentioned, I think I need to go to a trauma-informed therapist, he said to me. And I said to you, okay, that's great. And I don't mind signing you up for that. However, there are none that are around us. We live in a very rural area. There were none near us. So he had to settle for the next best thing for therapy. But I wonder if trauma therapy specifically is what my child needed. He was carrying around a lot of shame, a lot of guilt for many things. Perhaps he was battling addiction. It's a lot of shame that comes with that. He felt very guilty and responsible for our house burning down, even though it was an accident. He blamed himself. So healing trauma is something that I don't think that we fully understand. And I think we're just now starting to. But healing that trauma is crucial for our survival. I don't care what you promise somebody. I'll never do it. I'll never take my life. I'll never do that to you. That's not a promise they can keep. My ex-husband swore to me he would never take his life. I would never screw up my kids like that, he said. I couldn't do that to them. However,
he probably meant it in his right mind.
I know he did. He adored his children more than himself. I know that for a fact. But my ex-husband also was highly intoxicated when he ended his life. Same set of circumstances. His judgment was impaired. His mood was in the toilet. His impulsivity, his judgment, all of those impaired because of the alcohol. But you're right. I know he never would have chosen to do that in his right mind, just like Zack wouldn't have. Zack didn't want it out. He didn't.
I always say Alex was the last person that I can think of in our family, and even to this day, it's still that way, inflict pain the least of anybody I know. He was the pain healer. He was the one who wanted everybody to be okay. He was the glue. He was the one everybody went to. It was just, he was the least likely, right, to be somebody that would do something that would, in his mind, cause pain on everybody that he loved. And it shows you how clouded they are in that moment that they make that decision, because, again, they're making that decision in not a right mind state, because we know from listening to people that have survived their attempts that it was the farthest thing from their mind that they were causing harm to those they love. Because, as a matter of fact, many of them, their mind distorts it to the point that they believe they are actually helping the ones they love, right? That I've caused so much pain that ultimately this will be better for them. And we know that isn't a right mind thought, because we know that doesn't make sense.
Well, here's the thing that people need to remember, and why it's so important to heal this pain that they have on the inside, this insufferable, all-consuming pain that 99% of the time is from some trauma. And that is, with suicide, all we're doing is taking that pain and giving it to somebody else.
And in many ways, often as many as 100 other bodies, sometimes, in different degrees. Because I think the statistic is around 121 lives are directly impacted by every person that dies by suicide. That extends to their colleagues, their classmates, or fill in the blank, whatever their age was, ripples through the community and the family a level that's so immense that it's hard to comprehend.
I agree.
One of them harkened back to an episode I just released, I think it was the week before last, with Jamie Brickhouse, and he's actually a suicide attempt survivor who was an alcoholic and has been clean for 16 years now, I believe, but he thinks that alcohol should carry a warning that not only does it cause depression, but it can cause suicide, because he knew a statistic that I didn't know, because his is coming from a world of alcoholism and addiction, and that because when he's not on alcohol, he's not depressed. Alcohol actually was a depressant for him, versus some alcoholics become alcoholics because, they're trying to alleviate their depression and they're self-medicating. So it's a circular thing. But he gave me a statistic that I think 50% of all suicides, the toxicology report comes back that they're impaired by either drugs, alcohol, or both. So if that tells you that if those 50% were not under the influence of something, they very likely would be here. Both of his attempts were under the influence, heavily under the influence. And, he's a big advocate that, it's great that we've got cigarettes that now have warnings. And in some countries, they put an ugly lung on there and all sorts of things. He said alcohol should have warnings too, not just, bad for pregnant women. It should talk about the mental health effects of alcohol and what this can do to us, and actually creating a situation that we can't come back from. So I think as we wrap up, I want to make sure we've talked about everything, but I feel like, for me, some of the main takeaways from this, which were big, Patty, are, we already know this can happen to absolutely anyone. This whole idea that there's a set stereotype or a set type of family or any of that is baloney. This can happen to anybody. This can happen to all families. So we're in this fight together as humans. We absolutely have to normalize talking about all the hard stuff, like all of it. We have to just normalize talking about our feelings and our mental health. We have to talk about trauma aftercare. I 100% agree with you. Now that I live in a world of trauma survivors, which is what we are, there isn't a mother out there that's lost her child to suicide that isn't a trauma survivor. We now are thrust into a world and part of what I've become trained in too is trauma aftercare, narrative therapies and alternative therapies that do exactly that, go into our brains and help rewire the trauma and help us heal from the trauma, because that's the only way forward without it taking us down as well. And so trauma aftercare has to be huge, because it's also what's going to, if all of us can realize before we're living in a suicidal world of post-suicide loss, that trauma care should exist, then we would avoid many suicides to start with, which is a lot of what your point is that there's a lot of us that are living with unresolved trauma, and it becomes such a twisted thing in our mind, right, to try to survive and get over.
There's a big misconception about what trauma is.
Yes, there is. It's a buzzword.
It have to be this big, huge event that was, I can't even repeat it. It's so bad. No, that's not what trauma is. Trauma is your response to an event, not the event. It's your response to something that happened. Okay. And trauma for you and trauma for me can look different, but that's not what's important. It's what effect did it have on you? That's what we need to crack open and discuss and deal with. But people are misinformed about what trauma is exactly. And yes, you can have one huge big thing happen to you, or many little ones happen and still have the same effect. So we need to educate the public on what exactly trauma is.
We do, because you're right. So many people, they can see that your house fire was a trauma, but they may not understand. And I'm not saying anything did happen to you, but I'll just, for the sake of this, use you as, they may not know what happened in your house growing up behind closed doors that nobody else saw. So we have this preconceived idea that, like you said, someone that was a part of 9/11 and survived experienced trauma. Somebody that fought in combat experienced trauma. But the little girl that grew up in a household that had secret abuse going on that nobody knew about still had trauma, but nobody saw it. They may say, well, she didn't ever have trauma. What are we talking about?
Or you and I had the same trauma and it didn't affect you.
Right.
But it most certainly affected me.
Yep.
That is trauma. It's not the event.
It's how it affects us.
It affected you.
Yep.
The trauma. That's the point we need to drive home. I could get 10 people in a room with the same 10 experiences and only 2 of them say that they had something traumatic happen to them. Well, guess what? That's important. We need to deal with it's not the event, and we need to not be focused on that. You're right. For our big things, you're right. You survived 9/11, honey, yeah, you got trauma. We know that. Right.
But even inside of 9/11, some people that may have experienced things on the same floor that all got out or whatever, 2 out of 10 are going to have reacted differently than the other 8 because we're just different. We're different humans. We're born differently. We're physiologically different. We're raised differently. There's so many things that factor into how things affect us and why. And so we can't treat things, like you said, blanket of this is a traumatic event for everybody and this is not a traumatic event for anybody. We can't do that.
Did it impact you in such a way that it changed your life from that day forward?
Does it create disruptive thoughts? If it does, then thank you for pointing that out. And the only last thing I was going to point out that I feel like was such an important point was the connection piece of listen to people. Try to be connected, be there when they need you, that whole list, we've got to become more connected to the people.
Yeah, and I don't think we fully expanded on that. Stop putting it on the person that is having a difficult time to reach out. They are struggling just to stay alive and function in the next 5 minutes. They're not going to utilize what little energy and resources they have to reach out to you to ask if you can possibly do something for them. It ain't going to happen. It's not going to happen. If you want to drop them off a pie, go do it. If you want to do their laundry, listen, can you leave your key under the mat? I'm just going to come wash your clothes. If you're willing to let me do it, I'd love to come do that for you. They've got to eat. They need groceries. Go drop some off. Stop asking them to reach out to you.
Right. Stop asking them to give you permission. We have gift cards. Give them a gift card to the grocery store or something. The people that did something for me are still the people that stand out to me the most. Some of them the least expected. I mean, we had somebody show up at our door after Alex died, and they were just carrying bags full of things like toilet paper towels, paper plates. She said, these are the things that I found when my mother died I didn't have on hand and I needed more than anything because you have extra guests in your house. You have people needing all these things and you just don't want to go to the store. So she threw all these necessities from in bags and just left it with us and said, I'll be back. And my best friend who quietly just showed up and was present in my house all week. I didn't have to ask her what to do. Every time I turned around, she was just doing something. She was sweeping my floors. She was hearing that somebody needed to run to CVS or whatever. So she would say, I'll do it. And she would just go. Like the people that just showed up and did stuff were the people that showed that that's who I can rely on. Right. And so be that person, be the person to show up
in times of grief. Or you see that their hair's all messed up, their car's been breaking down. You see there's a change in the pattern. Reach out to them. Give them a cup of coffee. Listen, I have 2 clementines today. I brought you one. Here you go. You doing okay? It doesn't have to be huge.
Right. When you're that person and somebody sees you, because that's what it amounts to, that someone sees you, just to put your hand on their shoulder and say, listen, man, it looks like you've had a bit of a rough time, and you leave them the clementine or give them the coffee. And then maybe say, if you ever need somebody, listen, I'm here. And then you just leave it at that. You're not prying. You're not saying what the F's going on with you, but you're seeing them. That can make all the difference in the world. And then even if they don't lean into you, Patty, they might lean into somebody, right? They might go, and just the idea that somebody sees us can mean so stinking much, so stinking much. Like,
please be human. Please reach out to people. Please stop thinking you're going to offend them Please stop thinking that you need an invitation when somebody's not doing well. That person speaking to them could save their life. It could save their life. This person's being so nice to me. I just snapped out of it. It is going to get better. People do care. We don't know what's going through people's minds, but we've got to stop walking around with these blinders on.
We do. And stop not asking somebody. Kevin Hines, I don't know if you know who he is. He's one of the few living survivors from a jump from the Golden Gate Bridge. And he's dedicated his life to trying to help prevent suicide. And part of his story involves, he took a bus that day to go to the Golden Gate Bridge, and he had to make several different transfers. And he talks about how he was very obviously in a bad state of mind. And he said if just one person had talked to him that day and asked him how he was, that he knows beyond a shadow of a doubt he would have taken the bus back the other direction. But all the way there, with all the stops along the way, not one person cared to say, hey, man, you don't look like you're okay, or even strike up a conversation with him. We got off the bus and he jumped. Now his life had a bigger purpose. He's one of the few that have ever survived that jump and actually, is living, for the most part, disability free, has a lot of chronic pain. But he was spared for a reason, is the way he sees it. But he's a walking poster child for talk to somebody, reach out to your fellow man, just show him that you see him. Because that's what came to mind was he felt invisible that day. Yeah. Like nobody cared. And we just need to feel seen and cared about.
And you know what? You were saying earlier, like, you tried to do all the right things. You couldn't help your son to keep from taking his own life. You're right. I couldn't. I'm still determined to do this work. I'm still determined to save other people's lives. Yeah, I couldn't stop my son from doing what he did, but that doesn't mean that I don't have something valuable to share, that I can't be the one to carry his message forward, that I can't be the one to carry his memory and live my life at the same time and do this work. Not everybody wants to have these conversations, but I'm strong enough to do it. I'm determined to do it. And in my son's honor, I will do it until I can no longer do it. And something good will come from this. I'm convinced of it.
It's part of his legacy.
I may not see the path very clearly right now and how that will look. I don't even care. That's why I continue to be guests on shows like I am on yours right now, to try and help someone, to either have different interactions with people going forward. If someone is thinking of doing it, to perhaps reconsider and talk to someone, or even to truly understand just a little bit what people are going through in those final moments. Yeah. Those are the things that get me up every day and get me to have these conversations. Just like that gentleman said that he didn't die when he dove over that bridge. I didn't die when my son died, although I felt like I would. But here I am. And nothing will deter me. I will continue to fight, especially for those who can't, like my son. So I really appreciate the time and attention of this matter, and for the invite to come and chat. It was great.
I appreciate your time too, and I'm 100% with you. It's why I do this. If it just helps one person, it's worth it. So thank you for being willing to talk about it and share your truth and your message and a little bit of your Zack. And I appreciate you so much, Patty. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. Pleasure.
We'll talk soon.
Okay.
Bye. So thank you for joining me today, Grievers. If today's episode resonated with you, please consider subscribing to get weekly updates when I drop new episodes. And please take a moment to rate and review the podcast with 5 stars, especially on Apple Podcasts. Your support helps so much because it's how others are able to find the podcast and this community. Remember, though it may feel impossible now, hope and healing are within reach. I invite you to connect further by visiting my website, theleftoverpieces.com, where you'll find support, legacy options, retreats, resources, online Zoom groups, and so much more. Together, we can navigate this journey of healing. We can put our hearts, our leftover pieces, back together. And as they say here in Puerto Rico, poco a poco, juntas podemos. Little by little, together we can. Take care and talk soon.